Hello everybody, it's Michael Hollands once again for Sound of the Movies. Today I have the pleasure to speak to one of Hollywood's most popular and best composers, Mr. Harry Gregson-Williams. Ever since Harry came to LA in 1995, he has developed a very distinctive and versatile musical style which is beloved by a huge fan base. Over the course of his career, he has not only written iconic and great music for such films as The Enemy of the State, The Rock, Armageddon, Bridget Jones, Man on Fire, Deja Vu, Shrek, Antz, Sinbad, Spy Game, Kingdom of Heaven, The Chronicles of Narnia, The Martian, and many more, but he has also collaborated with some of the most successful and respected directors such as Joel Schumacher, Nicholas Roeg, Michael Mann, Michael Bay, Antoine Fuqua, Ben Affleck, and Tony and Ridley Scott. Welcome, Harry.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Harry, like I mentioned in my introduction, you came to LA in 1995. Prior to that, you had worked with Richard Harvey in England. Tell me a bit about your work in the UK and how you got to LA.
I started. I spent about 5 years, probably 1990 to 1995, learning the ropes with a very good English composer called Richard Harvey, who had a very glamorous studio in the King's Road in London, a rather fashionable part of London that I could not afford to be in if I wasn't working in. And Yeah, he taught me everything I could possibly have hoped for. Really, I played in his cricket team. I became great friends with him, so I met a great circle of people through him, and I got to work on whatever he was working on. So he was a very busy film and TV composer, still is, and he owned a recording studio with another guy that I went on to become friends with, Nick Lenny Smith. And yeah, I guess I started out making the tea there, and yeah, I progressed to ghostwriting a little bit for him, and it was through him that I met Hans Zimmer at that studio. Hans had come over to record a score for can't remember now, Crimson Tide maybe, something like that, or he was just finishing The Lion King. And Hans and I became great friends, and we exchanged ideas, and when it was time for him to go back to LA, which is where he'd come from, to continue his work on other films, he simply said, why don't you come back? So yeah, I pretty much dropped everything, and back then you could get a one-way ticket and survive on a holiday visa, which was a 3-month visa where visa waiver, where in fact you you had to leave the country and come back in every 3 months, because I didn't have a proper visa. But pre 9/11 you could do that sort of thing, and so that's what I did. I lived from day to day. Really, I didn't have much expectation, and I certainly didn't think I'd still be here after 22 years as I am. But yeah, things worked out for me, and I was very fortunate with how things did fall for me. So that's how I progressed from Richard to Hans, and they both were great mentors in their different ways.
Okay. When you started out in LA, you were the assistant or composing assistant for Hans Zimmer. What are your recollections of the collaborative process and the learning process at the old Media Venture studio?
Well, when I got there in June 1995, it was just Hans and a tech, someone who looked after all the machines. A guy, he wasn't involved in the actual music making, creative side of things, but his name was Mark Streitenfeld, another German chap, who I guess went on to try and be a composer. And yeah, so that was him as the tech, me as the composing assistant, and a couple of people, personal assistants that Hans had. So it was a very small concern, although already very successful. Hans had just won an Oscar for The Lion King when I arrived. Yeah, I started off learning the kind of science of film composing. And by that I mean the technical attributes that Hans insisted that I learn in order to be able to assist him. Because let's face it, if I was writing music on manuscript paper, pen to paper, that wasn't much use for him. The way that he had set himself up, the way that he knew how to do it was accessing banks and banks of machines and samplers and recreating the sound of an orchestra, so that it was a very collaborative process with him and his directors. And I think that's what made him a cut above the rest of the composers working at that time, is that he was able to open his studio door to directors, and they were able to sit in his studio and actually hear a really good mock-up of what they were going to get, and feel that they had an ability to impact the creative experience, so that it wasn't a question of you hiring Hans Zimmer and he would just give you whatever he was going to give you. So that was the idea, and so I, the first certainly the first 6 months, I was going to say a year, I don't know that it was that long, but certainly for a year I spent for 6 months I spent really learning all the machines that I needed to learn in order to be able to help Hans. Now, I couldn't afford, I didn't have anything in my bank account. I couldn't afford to buy banks and banks of samplers like he needed me to. So one day he whisked me over to Bank of America, the closest bank to Media Ventures, and he guaranteed a loan that he insisted I took out for $100,000, which was about five times the amount I'd ever earned in a year before that. But Bank of America lent me the money to buy this amazing rack of samplers, and the samplers that he was using at that time, which of course don't really exist now, but they were a Roland machine called a Roland 760. And I think I had to buy 24 of them because there was so little memory in these things. I think it was 24 megs available, and the one had to have loads and loads of them to be able to store all the orchestral samples inside them. Now, not just the machines, but the rack that the damn thing stood in, the wiring that was necessary, and the memory that had to go into them. It was just so expensive. I think it cost over $100,000 by the time I was done. But I remember Hans saying to me, "Look, one day this will help you, buy a house," or I can't remember what his expression was. "This will help you get to the next level. So don't think of it like the banker loaning you money. Think of it as you're investing in your future," or something like that. So I was only too happy to do that. I didn't mind being overdrawn at all. In fact, I'd spent a lot of my life being overdrawn at the bank. But he was more than happy to guarantee it. So they lent me the money. I got my stack of Roland 760s, and off I went. I was able to assist him. He was able to transfer cues to my room, to my little studio. And they would kind of sound a bit like they would in his room. I didn't have the hardware, all the synths that he had. But for instance, the very first film that I worked with him on was Muppet Treasure Island, and that didn't have a synthesizer in it. It was completely organic, orchestral, kiddies music, the orchestra racing around, telling the story, and that was right up my Strasse, actually. And I had a great time doing that, and. I guess after a year or two of assisting him on films and being a fly on the wall, meeting directors like Ridley Scott, Tony Scott, producers like Jeffrey Katzenberg, they had just formed DreamWorks Animation. That's what led me to my next step, which was to push the boat out myself and start at the bottom. I certainly didn't start with big expensive movies that Hans was working on. I think the first movie that I did was Christmas of that same year, probably 1995, possibly it was 1996. I don't know whether a year went by. I don't recall, but I did a little movie called The Whole Wide World with Renee Zellweger in it. So that was great for me, and it was one of those films where the director really wanted Hans. I'm sure he did. He didn't even know who I was, didn't care. But Hans didn't have time or inclination to do it, and he said, "Look, I can." A bit like the bank loan. He was able to guarantee it. He said, "Look, if they put my name on it, you write the music. The director will be happy with that, and he'd be happy if he thinks that if you run into trouble, I'll be there to help out." So obviously, being the sort of person I am, probably like anybody, that was the last thing that I was going to allow to happen. Once I'd been given the project I made damn sure that Hans didn't have to worry about the way I was scoring it. So, you know, it was so low budget, I don't even know whether I was paid to do that. I'm pretty sure I didn't receive any money. But that was the last thing from my mind. That, you know, the movie got into Sundance, didn't win Sundance, but it was fabulous, you know. And I actually ended up becoming great friends with the director, and I did all his films to the day he died last year. Which was very sad, but these things happen. That was Dan Ireland.
Yeah.
You know, he was the first director I had a relationship with. One of the first films that I worked on in that first couple of years where I was assisting Hans, not doing my own thing yet, was The Fan, which was not a particularly good Tony Scott film. And that's where I met Tony, and Hans had me, you know, write some cues on that movie. I mean, obviously he did all the heavy lifting, but I can't remember specifically what I did there, but enough to just flex my muscles a little bit. And I know Tony took notice, and we got to know each other by name a little bit. But, you know, a little bit later, a couple of years later, there I was doing music for one of his feature films, Enemy of the State, albeit I'm sure he probably asked Hans to do that. When Hans turned him down, I think because Trevor Rabin and I had kind of done Armageddon the year before, which is also a Jerry Bruckheimer movie.
Yeah.
Jerry's next film would be Enemy of the State, and I think he probably said, look, these two guys didn't screw it up too badly on Armageddon, why don't you give them a go? So Tony had obviously already met me, and he probably knew of Trevor, who became a great friend of mine, awesome chap. But obviously he had a profile as a guitarist with Yes, his group Yes. So we were given the opportunity to give Enemy of the State a go, and I guess I was the very, very lucky one that I don't think Tony necessarily wanted to go forward with two composers. I don't know why he would. I don't know why anybody would, really. So he chose me, so I'm very grateful for that. And as you might know, I did every movie and commercial and short film that Tony did between the beginning of Enemy of the State in 1996, I think that was, to the day he died, which again was very unfortunate. It was now 3-4 years ago. So that was a great relationship, and it's obviously a pattern begins to emerge when you look at things like that. That you know, composers' careers, which are probably not any different to production designers or editors or hairstylists or anything really, but you know, a pattern begins to emerge that a career in film is really about relationships. You know, it really is.
Sure.
I mean, some random people. I'm just finishing a film called Megalodon. For a quite a well-known director called Jon Turteltaub, and you know, I'm certainly not the first composer he's worked with. You know, he's worked with, I think, he worked with Trevor actually. But he's worked with Jerry Goldsmith, like James Horner. He's worked with some great people, and
and Hans,
so great people. You know, he's worked and Hans, really.
Cool Runnings, yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. You see, so that kind of came out of the blue at me last. Forgotten when I signed up for it. First thing this year, and you know, that's actually that's the exception rather than the rule. You know, when a director just sort of comes at you. Not a first-time director might be thinking, okay, now who do I want? And he might come after a specific composer. But someone who's worked with a lot of composers, you know, when that sort of lands in your lap, that's just great fortune, really. But my main point in this conversation was to illustrate how it's actually the relationships that you form with directors and producers that's really important, and it's very rewarding because. You know, for instance, with Tony Scott or Joel Schumacher or Ben Affleck, actually, more recently, you know, I've done 3 or 4 films with Ben, and I hope I'll do another 3 or 4. You can never be sure. With Tony Scott, I never, it never used to happen in a traditional way. Like, say, my agent would call me and say, you know, Tony's thinking about you, and he's thinking about some other composers, and you know, and eventually you might find out that you're doing it, but. It never used to go like that. I never used to hear from him until I could see, you know, on the internet. He was like in post-production on whatever it was, the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, or I don't know, Spy Game, Man on Fire. But no one called me. My agent knew nothing. And then, you know, I get a call saying, "Hey, you're doing it. Of course you're doing it. Where the hell are you?" You know, and he would assume that and so that was an awesome, glorious experience, really, from beginning to end. So yeah, I always think that that careers are really about the forming and maintaining of relationships, and I'm sure that's the same with actors and actresses. You see, and everybody who works in film, you see people working over and over with the same team, and that's really very rewarding. It's something to aim at. But as I say, it doesn't happen all the time. Earlier last year, actually, I was very fortunate. I got a script called The Zookeeper's Wife, and
Yes.
I read it and I really loved it. And I was told it was very low budget. I didn't care about that. I loved the story. And, the director clearly had made 1 or 2 films before, or 3 or 4 films before, and had not, I'd not worked with her before. And I was just very fortunate to get that job. And, I hope to be doing her next film. But often, like with my DreamWorks connection, having done Antz, which led to Chicken Run, which led to Shrek, which led to, I don't know, a decade and a half of Shreks and theme park rides,
Yeah.
that sort of thing, which led to Sinbad, which led to Flushed Away, which led to, any number of films that I did with DreamWorks. And it's kind of sad to me that's all kind of finished. I mean, I know DreamWorks isn't finished, but Jeffrey Katzenberg was the one who was championing my cause. He was the one who was trusting me each time. So he's moved on. He doesn't run DreamWorks anymore. So we'll see. I don't know whether they'll ask me to do another film. I'd certainly like to, but we'll see. There's a certain point where you think, well, there's probably some little guy sitting in Santa Monica, like I was in 1996, whose turn it is, as opposed to my turn now, 22 years on. So you can't get too upset about those things. Well, I think there's probably space for everybody in this business, but it's a little unpredictable. One can't really say with any certainty what one will be doing in 18 months. I know what I'll be doing within the next 14 months or 16 months, but after that, we'll see who calls, or we'll see who doesn't call, or, maybe Ben Affleck will decide he wants to go with another composer. I don't know. I hope not. Maybe Joel Schumacher will make another movie and ask me to do it. But these things are a bit unpredictable. We'll see how it goes. But I have a full slate of work, so I count myself very fortunate in that respect.
Okay. Before we talk about Ben Affleck and Joel Schumacher, I mean, let me just point out that you have become one of my favorite composers over the years. And actually, the very first time I took notice of your name was Enemy of the State. I was
not our best score.
I was
doing it, I tell you that much.
I was watching the film in the theater when I was, I think, 14 years old, and you scored it with Trevor Rabin. And I think Enemy of the State is one of my favorite Tony Scott movies, and I think one of the best films Bruckheimer produced. But early in your career, before Enemy of the State, you actually had worked on big assignments like The Rock and Armageddon.
These the Rock and Armageddon weren't my assignments. They were.
Yeah, sure.
You know how it goes. A team is brought in, and I mean, back in those days, it wasn't Media Ventures was, as I say, it wasn't a boatload of people. Certainly, my first few years there, it was just me and a few other people arrived. John Powell arrived, some other cats arrived, and they foraged their own way. But on Armageddon, I was it was very, very. I can explain very clearly and simply how that came about. I had worked on The Rock, and I'd done a little bit of the lifting there, heavy lifting done by Nick Gurney-Smith, and Hans had to come in and write a couple of themes. That was part of his deal, I suppose, but it wasn't anything to do with me. But I was there, I was kicking about, I was keen, and I did play a bit of a part in The Rock for sure. And Jerry noticed that. Jerry Bruckheimer noticed that, and I guess then when I guess when I don't know who tried to hire who on Armageddon. As I say, it wasn't. I was a backroom boy at that time. It wasn't my business to know that business. All I can tell you is that Hans came into my room one day and said, "Look, you need to work on Armageddon with this guy Trevor Rabin. Do you know who he is?" So I said, "Well, yeah, my sister used to play Bloody Yes in her bedroom, and I never used to understand it. It used to come blaring out of her bedroom." But man, I love some of those songs he wrote. So I'd love to meet him. So I didn't really question why I was suddenly being thrown together with Trev, but I was very fortunate and happy to do so. I knew it was a Bruckheimer film, and I worked with Michael Bay on The Rock, so I knew what I was getting into there. So yeah, we somehow between us pulled that off, but that was Trev's gig. He got it. I backed him up, and we got through that. And we've already discussed how we went on to do Enemy of the State. So that's just how these things happen. I saw Trevor recently at a party, and I said to him, "Trevor, why don't we do another score together?" And he was like, "What? You really want to?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why not? Let's revisit it 20 years later. Let's revisit something." And you write such a bloody great theme you did on Armageddon, and we'll do it together. But we have to find the right gig to do that. And I don't know whether he was serious anyhow, or whether I was serious even. That's all that is. But these things make for a varied and a fun life. Trevor Rabin was an excellent guy, very, very unusual character to be working in the film industry, as a film composer. But that was part of the appeal, I'm sure.
How would you describe your work relationship with Jerry Bruckheimer, or also Michael Bay, whom you had worked with on?
I don't. Yeah, no. As I say, I worked on The Rock, and I did a little significant work on that.
Yeah.
And then obviously Enemy of the State, I co-composed that, no question about that. Not Enemy of the State, Armageddon. I did quite a lot of the work with that with Trev. So I obviously got to know him there. It was hugely successful. I think it was the most successful film of the year at the box office. So that that doesn't go unnoticed. He asked me to write a couple of cues on, I think it was Bad Boys 2. But I weirdly enough, through those early years, I had a young assistant who didn't know much of anything when he arrived, but certainly not the technical side. But he learned very quickly. He's a smart guy. And after about 5 years, I had to kick him out because I said to him one day, "What the hell are you doing, flapping around under my desk trying to connect MIDI leads? You should be a composer, man." Because he'd done additional music on a few of my scores, and it was high time he went about making a life for himself and as a composer. And his name's Steve Jablonski. And little did I know that this guy who wouldn't say who's let's say shy, not exactly the same characteristics as Michael Bay, went on to be Michael Bay's, what should we call it? Michael Bay's composer.
Yeah.
So but he landed that. So I don't have an ongoing relationship with Michael. We got on fine when I was doing those things, those movies for him.
Let's talk about Tony Scott. You've done so many movies with him, and what made your collaboration so special?
Well, he was a very special, very empathetic guy. If you would have, I don't know, from the outside you might have thought that he was very thick-skinned and kind of brutish, but actually he's an incredibly sensitive, loyal, sweet man, and I had the best time. I mean, I can't imagine how I'd feel if my career hadn't involved doing all those films with him. For me, it feels like a very defining thing. I've sometimes been a bit distressed at reading how people reckon, I've basically written the same score each time for Tony Scott. That may be a bit of a fair comment, but, they don't understand that that's what we were driving at. If you look at Tony's films, a lot of the camera work, a lot of his editing, a lot of the way that he interpreted his script into and made these movies was by building on something that he had discovered in the previous movie. Now, the same was true of the music. For instance, I think before Man on Fire and after Spy Game, he came to me and said, "H, you've got to do this commercial." And I said, "But Tone, I don't do commercials. I don't know anything about. I can't do I don't know what to say in 30 seconds. I'm much more long-winded than that." He said, No. This is like an 8-minute thing. It's for Marlboro." I'm like, "Really? I didn't even know you could have a commercial for a cigarette." He's like, "Yeah, man, I've got that account. I do it. What we do here, what it is we practice what we're going to do in our next feature film." So I said, "Oh, great. So what are we doing on the next feature film?" He said, "Look, it's this thing with Denzel. Man on Fire, I'm going to use a lot of stuttery camera work, undercranked, overcranked camera work, and I'm going to use the camera very much like a character in the film, and from the way that the film is viewed, this will reflect the mood of Denzel's character on screen. So what I want to do with this Marlboro commercial is XYZ. I can't remember the specifics of what he wanted to do, but I want music to follow my camera very precisely. And that's not to say that you have to hit every cut, but when there's a smash cut to something, or the camera starts to loop around a character, I want to feel that in the music, and I want to feel you working with me as I move my camera about, as these characters develop. So we did whatever we were going to do on Marlboro, and didn't get fired, so that's good. And then we did, we started Man on Fire, and he was like, well, and it was an extension of that kind of work. And on Man on Fire, in the temp track, he had the best bits of Spy Game and the best bits of, he'd cherry-picked a few cues from Spy Game and cherry-picked a few cues from Enemy of the State. And, he said, look, this is the sort of thing we're going for. So the next film we did, may have been Domino, he, on the temp track, as an illustration of the sort of music he was looking for, he would have the best bits from Man on Fire, Spy Game, and Enemy, and then the next film would have had the best bits from Domino, Spy Game, and so on and so forth. So yes, he wanted to build a palette that was unmistakably something that accompanied his films, and often that would be, he taught me a lot about darkness and light, and how if he would often explain to me that in a lot of his films there were great swathes of darkness in his characters. I mean, for instance, in Man on Fire, a lot of the film you really do suspect that this poor little girl is dead, or is about to be killed by her kidnappers. So there's a huge darkness running through the film, and he would often just point out to me that if you look at an old painting, a Rembrandt or something like that, that is that's incredibly dark and full of dark textures, quite often there will be somewhere in that painting, on that canvas, there will be a shard of light, a small speck of pure white brilliance. And his point was that in order to be able to feel the darkness, to feel the depth of darkness and the tone of that, one needs to be able to compare it to what light is. So in other words, if I were to give him music that was just completely dark, how was the listener, and in turn the viewer, to be able to interpret the depth of that darkness if there was no light from which you can judge those depths? And I found that very fascinating. I found a few paintings throughout history that actually illustrate this point really, really well. In fact, I use them as teaching aids when I teach. Shoot them up on the screen. And there's a wonderful picture called the Barge Haulers, which is by Repin, I think, a Russian painter. And there are these poor, messed up peasants hauling a boat out of the water. And in the fort, it's all very, very, very dark browns and dark, almost blacks. And their faces are cloudy and stormy. But in the foreground, there's a little piece of litter, a little bit of trash. It's a little piece of paper that's there for no other reason than it's kind of a tuning fork, allowing you to judge the darkness that you're seeing. It's just sitting there on the beach, and it's perfectly white. It's just white. It's a very small thing. If you were to step back from the painting, you might miss it. But if you look at it, this idea of darkness and light working in tandem, it was something that Tony wanted to explore all the time. And I translated that as often as a very clean, unobstructed, and unsubversive piano sound with some high strings, playing something quite innocent. Man on Fire, Spy. I mean, probably all my scores for Tony has that thing in it. Now, obviously, the melodies I've chosen, the harmonies are different, but that methodology, that method of doing things was something that he wanted me to pursue and felt that we needed in his films. And that would represent some sweetness, probably, and certainly light. Often there might be some sort of bells or crotals, some glockenspiel, something very high and bright and sparkly, but at the same time, this kind of swathe of darkness underneath it. And so that was something that throughout his movies, I don't think I have time to to talk to you specifically about every score that I did for him, but throughout his movies, you will find if you listen to the score, there's a combination of darkness and light going on, as almost battling it out with how sweet and innocent this can be, as to how dark and depressing that can be. And that sort of process was invaluable to me, and I loved it. And it's just a shame that it's finished. After he died, I'd been asked to do a number of films that would probably have me scoring in a similar vein, but I don't really want to do that for anybody else. So I haven't accepted those challenges. And there are a couple of filmmakers that I do respect who I've written not in a similar vein, but I've taken on a lot of what I learned with Tony through that. For instance, Antoine Fuqua, The Equalizer, and I'm going to do Equalizer 2 next year.
Great.
But Antoine's a similar kind of filmmaker to Tony Scott in that respect. But does that kind of answer your question?
Yes. Of all the scores you've done with Tony and all films you've worked on with Tony, I think Spy Game would be my favorite in terms of...
Yeah, well, same here. I mean, look, there's a case in point. So, for reasons that are difficult to remember, actually, but there was a concept behind it. At one point there is a solo boy singing a treble, like almost a boy chorister, and that would represent, I think that was Brad Pitt's character, and the kind of simplicity and the loyalty that he had been shown by the older guy, the other pretty boy in the movie, Robert Redford. Tony used to say, I've got two of the pretty boys on screen, but one's losing his looks pretty quick. I love that movie, and there are all sorts of, Tony used to let me into his thinking. I remember saying to him once we were doing, there's a small scene, you may not even remember it, but it's not a pivotal scene, but the girl whose screen name I've forgotten now in the movie, the girl who Brad Pitt falls in love with, who he's trying to rescue from the Chinese jail. She's kidnapped at one point in the movie, and she's actually standing at a market, a souk, probably in Beirut or somewhere like that. And it looks like she's doing her grocery shopping. She's standing at a stall, and there's all sorts of fruits laid out in front of her. And the colors in that movie are so beautiful, quite muted, and lots of greens and browns. And a beautiful palette, I thought. But in that scene, the oranges, she's actually picking up an orange at the moment that this VW minivan pulls over and the doors slide open, and she's basically bundled into it and kidnapped. But I remember saying to Tony that there's something about the way the color orange was just kind of shining through, and we both he understood exactly what I meant when I said, look, man, I several years ago, this was then, so I was referring to something that happened in the early 1990s before I came to America. I found myself, very fortunately, working with Nick Rogue, who is just an amazing English filmmaker who had made one of the films that made a huge impact on my life when I first saw it, which is Don't Look Now.
Yes.
And that film centers around the fact of the color red. In amongst all the colors of everything that he's using in that film, the color red has a special, and if you've seen the movie, you'll know exactly why. The child who drowns at the beginning of the movie is wearing a red raincoat. And anyhow, I turned to Tony and said, man, this reminds me of Don't Look Now, right? This, and he smiled, big smile at me. He's like, H, you're onto it, or something like that. He didn't say that was his little homage to that, but, he was open to having these conversations. And, once I remember, he was quite eccentric. Once I was working where it might have been Deja Vu or something like that, and I was chiseling away. It was half dead, but I hadn't been to bed for a few days, and it was about 4 or 5 in the afternoon. I wasn't expecting Tony at the studio at all, because normally, he'd come every other every other evening or something like that, come on review cues towards the end of a project. But on this occasion, and we would always be at high alert. I mean, DEFCON 8, if it was a Tony day. All my staff, my receptionist, she would have never let him just walk into my room. We were all, very aware that these were crucial meetings. The coffee would be fresh. Everybody would be on high alert and top form as Tony would come. But on this occasion, my phone rang beside my workstation, and my receptionist said, "Oh, Tony's here. In fact, he's on his way into your room." I'm like, "What? It's not." Oh, Christ. So I put the phone down. In walked Tony. Said, "H, I'm just having my hair cut." So I said, "What? What? Okay." So a couple of things. Tony Scott was bald. That was the first thing to know. The second thing was like, I am not a hairdresser. I may be your composer, but I don't know what the hell he's talking about. So I thought, well, since I can't work for a couple of hours because I've got to sit still, I'm going to come and sit here. I've brought my hairdresser with me. And in walked a girl behind him. So she put a seat right just behind me, just behind where I was working. And, put a gown around him, and off he went. He had his, the few hairs that he did have cut. And this is the sort of chap he was. And, he really made you feel like you were collaborating. He made you feel like you were part of a team. And he was always the sort of person you would go the extra mile for, because he set that example. He was incorrigible in his desire for perfection. And
yes.
During that period, if you'd have talked to me and interviewed me about him, I'd have said exactly what I've said to you. But I probably, because my wounds would have been quite fresh, I'd have probably added that he was the hardest director to work for imaginable. Only because, not in any nasty way, there was a nasty bone in his body. But, he would make me redo things again and again and again and again and again. And he would it might be I don't know, the denouement of Unstoppable, like some 8-minute opus cue that he came and reviewed. He's like, H, it's got to be more exciting than that. I'm coming back at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and this was 10 o'clock the previous night. And one would be left in tatters. He'd leave the room, and but looking back on these things, those challenges are possibly what hopefully makes those moments sound as edgy and disturbing as they were at the time to create, because he was no walk in the park in that respect. But I never complained about working with him, because it was just such an honor, and he made one feel like he made you feel like you were the center of his universe at that time when he was in your studio, and that everything that I did counted to the maximum amount, and he respected everything about the process. So he was a good egg, and I've been very fortunate to have done a few with his brother as well. But they're very different characters, very.
Okay, well, those are the moments that you actually have to treasure if you have a director like Tony, and those are the let's say the most important relationships, and I think you and Tony did form a very great team, and Tony still is one of my favorite directors of all time. And
same here. And during that period, the because they're so prolific, these Scott brothers. There was any pausing for breath. No sooner had we finished Pelham, what was the next one we did after that? I can't remember.
Unstoppable, right?
Well, no, okay. He called me up and said, H, you better be ready for this. It's this great thing. It involves this train. And I said, well, hold on, haven't we just done that? He's like, no, this is very different, very different. But yeah, so I'm fully aware of how lucky I was to have that time with him. And another director I've kind of grown up with, as it were, because let's face it, when I joined Tony's party, he'd already done a great big wad of the work that he was going to do. But I kind of came up with Andrew Adamson. He directed the Shrek movies, and then he took me along for the Narnia ride, which was amazing. Sure. We've done another movie after that, but we're constantly in touch. We're great friends, and have a great respect for each other and each other's work. So that's another relationship that I hope is ongoing, and well, we'll see. watch this space.
Okay. Before we go into the let's say Shrek universe and Chronicles of Narnia, I would actually like to talk about Tony's brother Ridley. So basically from one Scott brother to another. And Kingdom of Heaven, for instance. I think Kingdom is one of your 5 best scores that you've done so far. And was it a particularly difficult writing process? I mean, the film, the director's cut, has a running time of 190 minutes, give or take a two.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of music to be done, and I felt like, obviously from the outset, the last time he'd done anything, he won a bloody Oscar with Hans doing Gladiator. So I thought, well, what am I doing? Why are they asking me? Why don't you just? Yeah, so they'd obviously had a falling out, sort of handbags at dawn. I don't know what they'd done, but so I got a call from the music editor who actually, the aforementioned Mark Streitenfeld, who'd morphed from the tech to, I don't know, Ridley Scott's music editor. He called me from London saying that Ridley and Hans can't make it work. He's listening to cues tonight. He's listening to James Horner. He's listening to music tonight. He's going to decide. I think he's going to call you, Harry. So I should watch out. So I went to bed that night wondering how Tony would feel about that. I was thinking, I've got a brother, and there's a certain amount of sibling rivalry, but there's also a lot of respect. But I don't know about how Tony would feel about me working for Rid. Anyhow, it was all speculation until Ridley offered me the movie. So he did call me next morning. He said that you need to do it. But so I did say, look, do you think you can check with Tony? Because it was always a bit awkward because, as I mentioned, I never got kind of hired or booked to do a Tony Scott film. So I couldn't say to him, I knew, I don't know what year that was, 2006 or 2007. I could see that Tony was preparing his next film. It was going to be called Domino. I couldn't tell from the internet, when it would come to fruition. And I couldn't really call Tony and say, when are you doing, when am I doing Domino? Because I felt that would be presumptuous. He hadn't asked me to do it. So I didn't want him thinking I've been complacent. So I was between a rock and a hard place. So I said to Rid, could you check? I know Tone's preparing Domino. Anyhow, answer came back, yeah, Tone's good with lending you out, but you've got to be back by September to do Domino. So for the first time, I actually did get kind of booked, as it were, to do a Tony Scott film in advance. So that year, I don't know what the film was I did before Kingdom, but it was quite a year to go from whatever that film was to Kingdom to Domino. That was quite, a sleepless year, probably, looking back on it. But, Kingdom of Heaven was what it was. It required me to pack up my studio in LA and transplant myself to London, feel out of place to work. So I got in touch with Trevor Horn, who has a studio on Portobello Road, or he used to. And I hired his studio for, I don't know, 6 months or something. And, off we went. So a lot of writing, a lot of music recorded, some of it rejected in the end. Thank you very much. Lovely. Bit of Jerry Goldsmith. Whatever. So that was that. Yep.
Yeah, I remember when Kingdom had, there was a Jerry Goldsmith cue or two in there, and also Graham Revell, The Crow, which was Tempt.
Whatever. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So when you lose out to Jerry Goldsmith, I don't think you can complain. I didn't. I don't think you've ever heard me complain about it. I knew at that time that Jerry Goldsmith had done a film called Alien and had some of his score replaced. So I thought to myself, well, okay, this is what this director does. But I think a lot of people commented on that, thinking that was kind of a failure on my part. I didn't look at it like that because I actually wrote about 3 to 3.5 hours of music that he did like. So there was a 2-minute Jerry Goldsmith cue in there. Well, whatever. As far as I was concerned, I was happy to get through it, and he hadn't replaced the whole bloody score. So. Yeah, and anyhow, who am I to complain that, was Jerry's cue better than mine? Yeah, probably. I wouldn't doubt it. It's Jerry Goldsmith, for I said. So, so I took that on the chin and moved back to more pleasurable things.
Okay. Okay, well, I think that kind of thing happens all the time, temp.
Not really. Not really.
Not really?
Doesn't happen. Not really. Not with most directors. Maybe with that one, but not with most. That's the first time it happened to me. That might be the last time, I think, as well. I think I've done 100 scores or something.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it happens most of the time at all. But it happened to me. And, yeah, there you go. And actually, since we're on the subject, 'cause I'm sure you want to hear about it, years later we did do The Martian together. We did that pretty successfully. He won a Golden Globe for it. And, yeah, sadly the music wasn't that as well received, but a lot of it, the behind the camera crafts got Oscar nominations and all that stuff. So it was successfully done. But he did ask me to do his next film, which was Alien Covenant. I did start writing that score, and I did have a meeting with him where he said, I think I need to go in a different direction, and left the room. So that's how it happened with him. Yeah.
Okay. You've written quite a few scores for animated films, and you've also worked with John Powell. He did, Antz, Chicken Run.
Yeah.
Do you think that those movies offer a certain opportunity for creativity? Because I think quite a few composers have written some of their best works for animated films.
When we were halfway through Chicken Run, I think we were overthinking it, and Jeffrey Katzenberg came into a meeting with us and said, look, guys, can you just drop this whole sort of we're doing a movie with chickens thing? This is Romancing the Stone. This is... no, it's not. No, he said that about Antz. Chicken Run. This is The Great Escape. This is, don't think of this as an animated movie. It needs the same emotional arc. It needs the same punch emotionally. Its characteristics are just going to be exactly the same as if you weren't looking at chickens or ants or green ogres. Where, it's not that's not sort of cartoony crap that I want you to do. And that was music to both John and my ears, because neither of us wanted to do that kind of Warner Brothers zipping around stuff. I think they make a lot of movies like that, and a lot of scores get, with like 59,000 cues of 20 seconds. That's not what John and I did, and we were really lucky not to do that. And I think we've both gone on to do other scores without each other, where we took that forward and said, okay, great. That's a little less of the cartoony type thing and more of like, what's this about? Who are the characters and what do they care about? So yeah, that was that. I think those films afford you an opportunity to do whatever you want, just like any other film.
Okay. You have recorded so many scores in LA and also in London, and I understand you recently went to Vienna to work on or to record the Mag with Jon Turteltaub.
I think this movie is going to end up being called Megalodon, but I don't know. We had a fantastic time there. Very good orchestra, fantastic, superb, state-of-the-art scoring stage. Lots of Wiener Schnitzel. What else can I say? Yeah, it was a huge pleasure, and I always think when I step up onto the podium, wherever I am in the world, what a great fortune this is. I mean, unbelievable. The standard of musicianship was fabulous. Don't ask me to compare it to London or LA, because I won't. The orchestras all over the world are fabulous. Some in Eastern Europe perhaps aren't as good as the ones that we've just mentioned, but these top orchestras, it's amazing what they'll do. And also, you remember, what they'll do is slightly limited by the amount of crap you put in front of them. I mean, if you give them a shitty piece of music, they're not going to be able to make it sound much better than shitty. So I think the ball is in the court of the composers. Let's write some wonderful music, and perhaps they'll interpret it in a wonderful way. But yeah, the standard of musicianship and the standard of the recording stage and all the staff that go with it were exemplary. Absolutely fantastic. Wonderful. We had a great time.
Okay, fantastic. A couple of days ago, I watched the movie Miss You Already, and I've come across I've come across a statement of yours on the internet where you described the film as particularly challenging. What made the film so challenging to you?
Well, I think the Catherine Hardwicke is quite a filmmaker. I mean, I couldn't believe her film 13. I thought that was just an unbelievable film. And, you know, it turned out that I had met her a few times when she was filming a big movie with Robert Pattinson in it. I don't know. This silly big series of movies that they made. Anyway, I had met her during that time, so well, I'd never been asked to work with her, and it just so happened that I was free for 3 or 4 months, and I was thinking, who could I write to? Who would I like to work with if I possibly could wave a magic wand? And one of the people on that list was Catherine, and I got her email from a friend of mine who I know knows her. And I just happened to email and say, look, listen, I don't know whether you consider it. I'm probably completely the wrong person. I have no idea what you're doing with this film, miss you already, but if there was an opportunity to meet you, I'd love to meet you, and I'd love to work with you. Boom, she got right back, said, oh, well, I'm just in post-production. I have no idea what I'm going to do with music. We met, we liked each other, and I did it. But it was quite challenging because she didn't really want me to behave like I had learned how to behave as a composer. So she didn't want every moment scored. She didn't want anything like a Shrek score. She didn't want anything like a Tony Scott score. She wanted a lot of her music to sound as if it could have been a needle drop, in fact. So that posed a particular challenge for me. But that's not to say it wasn't thoroughly enjoyable. And I absolutely loved doing it. I loved the movie as well. I thought it was really worthwhile. And it was a very happy time, and it ended up with a premiere in Toronto, which I attended. First time I've been to the Toronto Film Festival. It was great. I loved it. It wasn't very successful at the box office, but I don't think I was expecting it to be. But it was phenomenal working with her and seeing her very unique working methods. So that was an awesome experience.
I mean, I like the film a lot. I mean, it is very lovely and also very sad, actually. I mean, some scenes are actually a tearjerker. And my favorite cue that you wrote is the I think it's called Goodbye at the end.
Yeah.
And very lovely piece of music.
It was very tough writing that, and obviously when one's dealing with cancer and people you love dying, this needed a lot of thought and a lot of subtlety. And Catherine absolutely was in the mindset of not wanting to be too manipulative, and that the music, whereas in another movie it might take 4 or 5 moves and shakes to describe a certain situation, she'd like it to take 1 or 2, if that. So it would be very subtle, very undemonstrative, yet have an underlying weight of emotional content. So it was very challenging. I was really happy to do it, actually.
Okay. One question about your work process. How do you work actually? Do you have like strict do you have like strict rules, not more than 5 days a week, or do you work 7 days?
I've heard a couple of composers say, "Yep, I only work Monday through Friday, and I don't work weekends." Well, they haven't been doing the same thing as I have for the last 20 years. No idea how they get away with that. Yeah, no, I mean, I work when I work. I work the amount that I have to work in order to get to succeed and to get these things done, which is an awful lot. I don't have any rules at all. And my only rule at the moment, the last 2 or 3 years, has been to try and make sure that I'm only working for people who I really want to be working for, and on films that I can take a little bit more time and do a little bit better than I have in the past. So those are my rules. But do I have rules about Monday to Friday? I think that's bullshit, by the way. If any composer tells you that, I don't know, either he's got like 50,000 assistants working around the night, covering his ass, or he's lying. That's the end of it. No, maybe, I don't know. Maybe they haven't worked with the Scott brothers or, Andrew Adams or Ben Affleck or any of these guys. Maybe I just, it's all consuming. I mean, tell me, I'd like to really see how a composer could possibly work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and do what he has to do. He can't be doing it like I'm doing it. Or maybe I've missed something. Maybe there's a software that's got a button that just separates everything. Yeah. Anyhow, that's just me.
Okay.
I'm nearly run out of time here, Michael.
You're out of time. Okay.
Not quite. Very nearly.
Okay. You've just mentioned Ben Affleck, and
Yeah,
you've done three
good.
movies. Gone Baby Gone. You did The Town,
Yeah,
and you did
yeah,
Live by Night.
I did.
Okay. Talking about Live by Night, it was also produced by Leo DiCaprio. Did do you, in general, talk strictly to Ben about the musical approach, or
Always,
excuse?
always. Yeah.
Okay, so Leo wasn't very involved about the musical process on Live by Night, or?
I don't know about that. Maybe Ben was running things past me. No, my relationship with Ben is that he lives very close to me. He'll come to my studio. He'll be in my face during post-production, which is how I like it. That's how we've done it in the past. And, he'll demand, he'll be very demanding to me, and I expect that. I want that. He has his own style of filmmaking, which is different to anybody else's that I've worked with, and he's his own his own way of understanding what I'm trying to give him, and understanding how to direct me in any way if it's not quite what he wants. He's a musical guy. He doesn't necessarily sit down at the piano and play, but he's musical. He feels music, and he knows his films really well. I think he's a very, very good director. And so, one of my favorite films I think I've ever done is Gone Baby Gone, his first film. And I don't know how the hell I remember reading the script for that. I don't know how many other composers in town read that script, but I read there was so little dialogue. I couldn't believe it. I thought, bloody hell, the music's going to have to work overtime here. I love this. I went for my interview with them, and I think what I know he was meeting some other people that day. I think what maybe was a surprise was he said to me, the first thing he said in this interview, he had a bunch of young producers in the meeting with him to support him, I suppose. And I was kind of sitting on the other side of the room alone. And he said, look, I don't think I don't really want much music in this movie. I could tell he didn't really trust music. I think he thought that he wanted to make films that weren't manipulative. And I think he thought that music would probably push his films in a direction he didn't want them to go, which is understandable. But I had to disagree with him and say, like, I mean, you haven't shown me anything from your film, but reading the script, I think music could play quite a big part. He disagreed. We were kind of disagreeing. Had a bit of a disagreement first out of the gate, and one of his producers, which is a young guy called Sean Bailey, who's now got a very top job at Disney.
Yes, Sean Bailey. Okay.
Yeah, so Sean said, I think Sean had a copy of my score for Man on Fire in my in his car or something. I don't know. But he was very encouraging to Ben. Look, don't discard this guy out of hand. You should probably give him a second thought. Anyhow, long story short, however it happened, got the job. And actually, as we worked on the music, I think there was about 45 to 50 minutes of score in that movie. And I think at first he probably thought there would be 10 or 15 minutes of music. So we grew with that together, and The Town required a lot more music, and Gone Baby Gone, and Live by Night even more than that. But he's a great director, he's a great guy. He's very charming, intelligent, and unselfish kind of filmmaker.
Yeah.
And he's another in the Tony Scott mold of making you feel like you're really a part of a team and an important part of that team, and that goes a long way when someone imparts that kind of trust to you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I like his films a lot. I've seen all of his movies, which he directed. I think he's a very talented filmmaker, absolutely. And I hope he do one more or two more with him, or maybe even three.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to it. Do we have time for one more question, Harry?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
There is another director that I wish you would do another film with. It's Joel Schumacher, and
Yeah, I was thinking about Joel the other night, but because I've done 2 or 3 with him, and I really liked him. He's an incredibly eloquent man, and full of wonderful stories of days gone by, and very supportive, respectful, and every meeting was filled with plenty of humour and grand stories of old Hollywood, and I loved it. I actually loved being with him, but I don't think he's making too many movies at the moment, so we'll see.
yeah. I mean, one of my favorite films is Veronica Guerin.
Yeah, same here. Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, poster of that up here. I like the poster. I like that very much. It was a beautiful film to work on, and
Absolutely. And it's also one of my favorites Jerry Bruckheimer productions, actually.
yeah,
And
yeah. I might say that it's probably the least successful Bruckheimer film that he ever made.
yes, but
Oh yeah.
I wish
Nearly brought his company to the knees.
no, no, no. But truth be told, I wish Jerry Bruckheimer produced more films of this kind. No,
Yeah, well, that's probably the reason he doesn't.
you know, I mean,
Bombed at the box office, but yeah, no, it was great. Joel's a fabulous guy, and I wish him all the best luck and health in the world. I can tell you, the world could do with more humour in it, and he used to bring humour and a certain spark to all his meetings with me. Yeah, I had a great time with him.
okay. I hope you enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, sure.
And I just want to thank you again for taking so much time out of your schedule. It was truly a pleasure and an honor for me here.
Okay, very good, Michael.
Thank you. Bye, Harry.
Bye.